Hey guys, it's Biggs. Now I'm somewhere really special today. You guys can probably tell by the backdrop where I am. I'm here for an event this weekend and I'm here with an absolute dear friend. This lady here that's sitting beside me here, she's going to come on screen in a second. She's been an absolute dear friend for many years. We've been friends for well over a decade. We met at a convention years ago and we've never stopped. We hang out all the time whenever we get a chance. She's absolutely my devoted inspiration for everything doing YouTube. She pestered me for at least a year or two to get doing this for you guys. And I absolutely love any chance that I get to see each other. And my dear friend here, Rachel O'Leary.
Hi guys.
So I thought today, there's nobody I've ever wanted to do. You guys know about my series, The Aquatic Masters. There's not anybody else I've ever wanted to do more than Rachel for an interview. So today, that's what we're doing for you guys. So my aquatic mentor, my aquatic master, my dear friend, Miss O, Rachel O'Leary. Thanks for having me again. Love it, lady.
I don't know that I would consider myself a master, but we can argue about that later.
We can argue. We can do that in the interview.
Yeah.
That'd be part of the fun. So we got to talk about all sorts of stuff. We don't have a plan. Normally, some of these things are all organic and planned out, what we're going to do, what we're going to start, what we're going to end. We're not doing that today. We're not doing that at all. So today I thought, we should just start from the beginning, how you got into the hobby, the challenges you faced, how you got to the point that you said, you got this massive fish room, how you've evolved, how you started, how you evolved, where you're going now, some of the things that you've had to change over the years, and you're really starting to really diversify, not just your YouTube channel, but just your personal interest in your hobby and
right.
stuff. So what started it all for Miss O? Now, I know a lot of the stories, and your YouTube viewers probably know it, but my channel's a lot smaller. Maybe one day it'll get to yours, but my viewers may not know how you got started.
Well, I had fish growing up. My father had fish tanks. We had family fish tanks in our living room. And when I moved out of home, I didn't really keep fish. But then when we started our family, for my first Mother's Day, I got a really tiny little aquarium with African dwarf frogs.
Yep.
And from those, I got interested in apple snails. And back then, there was dial-up internet, so I would go on the internet and look up information about these different species, and I learned about...
Wait 3 minutes for it to load.
Oh, it was awful.
The kids today don't understand
This was the very beginning of available internet beyond local hosting services. So I went online and I learned about the fact that there were these 0.006% chances of specific color traits within mystery snails or Pomatia diffusa. So I started working with those, and that led into several hundred gallons of apple snail only aquariums. And then I got interested in trying to figure out species that I could possibly combine with them that wouldn't impact their breeding, meaning that they didn't nip at antennas and they weren't that annoying. And that's when shrimp were first introduced into the US market in about 2003, 2004. So I got cherry shrimp at a time that they were $25 to $30 a piece. I still have the colony
going. Can't even
going.
fathom that.
Yeah, so I started working with those and really fell in love, and then I started importing other color forms, but in order to get species, you have to order a whole lot of them. You can't just order the 10 or 20 that you want, so I would get in 600, 1,000, 2,000, and then sell off my extras, and then sell off my offspring, and then I started writing articles, and I would sit in...
And that's really what started getting you into the public eye.
Right.
Because you weren't just passionate. You were passionate and extremely devoted to a very small area.
My focus was this big, and what was really funny at the time is I would go to these events, these fish events, and they were all literally about fish, and I would just be made fun of for hours for keeping feeders. And
we don't draw any attention though. We blend in.
It was good natured, but it really was not good natured. People were absolutely making fun of me for focusing my efforts on essentially cockroaches for the aquarium.
Yep.
But I saw that there was huge potential. They were very beautiful, they were very breedable, they were super appropriate for small aquariums, and I don't think much is appropriate for small aquariums. And from that interest in those little tiny shrimp and snails and crabs, I put out a call for fish that would mature at under 1.5 inches. And then I started
And
bringing
that was
in,
only in the infancy then. Like
Yeah,
you never
they-
saw those things even on exporters lists at all.
no, they weren't available anywhere. You would see, like, I would go into Google Scholar and I would read papers and use Google Translate to read papers from other countries.
Yep, I've done that.
You know, places, you know, in Europe you would see some of that, certainly in Asia, but not in the United States, and I wanted it.
Yeah.
So again, I started bringing them in huge numbers to get the group that I wanted. Then I would photograph, try and breed. If I had success, put out papers on how they bred,
Yep.
and document everything on forums. And that's really how I got the reputation for.
Well, you had
For what I do.
such attention to detail. I remember that the articles that you wrote and a lot of the earlier presentations you wrote when you first really started becoming well in the public eye. You were doing those articles and those videos and those public speaking engagements talking about the shrimp, but not just about the shrimp, but you were actually witnessed a lot of the different ailments and diseases and parasites
Yes.
that were coming in on shrimp, and you really had really good photography that you could showcase these things, and then you did the research and the time put into it to try and figure out how to solve those problems, because those wild-caught shrimp were coming in massive numbers,
Well,
and a
and
lot of them had problems that
it
could
was-
wipe out the whole colony.
Well, most of it was actually from the farmed shrimp, because the farms that were farming them were not following aquaculture guidelines that had been set out in the 90s.
Okay.
So a lot of the disease that we see in shrimp are from poor husbandry on the farms,
Okay.
not a wild.
But we still-
there are some parasites.
Not just shrimp, but in Canada, we just passed all these new legislations, and I was just recently in Kentucky, and I saw that even when we went to the store, I thought, well, when I go to the States, I'll go to a store and I'll go and stand in their medication section, and we went to 2 stores in Kentucky, and they had no medications. And in Canada, everything that has a label that says treats, cures, anything on the label is now illegal in Canada. Even natural remedies like Melafix and Pimafix
Right.
are illegal. So in Canada, we're really hampered right now that there's nothing. And specifically with like the Asian market, anything that's raised in a mud pond, those fish come in with things that you don't want in your tank. Calamanus and,
And
very
that
challenging
is
things to
the
deal with.
same thing with the invertebrates. Now, it's generally only the lower dollar shrimp that are raised outdoors like that. All the neocaridinus, the cherries, the yellows, those
Yeah.
things. So they're the ones that you see pretty riddled with disease. So, but yeah, so it just grew from there. And, you know, in order to house a lot of fish, I had to have more and more aquariums. And
She has a healthy amount of tanks, I'm sure you guys have seen.
And one of the things that I have made sort of my goal or my mission is to encourage people to not limit keeping small creatures in small aquariums.
Yes.
That you get a much more natural display if you have a whole lot more of a species in a larger aquarium. So I like to think of it as sort of redefining nano, making nano not just a tank size, but about building a community of small-sized things.
Yeah, you always used to talk about your Nano 75.
Yes.
Yeah,
Which
typical
people-
nano tank.
People cannot, for some reason, cannot wrap their heads around the fact that small fish are nano fish. So they don't have to be in a nano-sized aquarium. They can be nano fish in a standard aquarium and still be nano community.
Yeah. They'll still be in a big river or a big lake. They're
Right.
not in a nano river or a nano lake.
Right. So, and even the misconception of like what the rice paddy fields are.
Yeah.
These are vast bodies of water. They're not.
They may not be
They're
deep.
not. Yeah. They're not like 1 gallon
Yes.
things,
Yeah.
or they wouldn't be able to grow much rice.
Yeah.
So.
And rice paddies may not have a lot of water, there may not be a lot of flow, but it might cover acres and acres.
Right.
So yeah, like
Lots of
betas
dilation.
perfect examples. Like each male might stake out a territory within that thing. But the difference being in the wild is if one male loses, he swims away.
Right.
In an aquarium, they can't do that.
Well, and I think it's important too with small fish and invertebrates to remember that because they're small, they are sort of low man on the totem pole for the food chain.
Yep.
So there is very much strength in numbers, and the more you have of a species, the more outgoing they're going to be, the more visible they're going to be, the more likely to breed they're going to be, and just the better visual display they'll make within your aquarium.
You find it kind of weird that some of these nano fish have exceptional colors. If I was a little fish in a big area with big fish, I'd want to be gray or brown.
Well, I think a lot of the super brightly colored ones come from area with areas with a lot of tannins too.
Yeah, very dark
you
water
know.
and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because some of them, like from a fishing standpoint, it's usually those really bright lures that attract fish. And if I was a
Right.
little fish, I don't think I want to be garishly flame red or anything.
Right. Yeah, like the chili phosphorus.
They stand out a little bit. Even in a big tank, they're still going to stand out like a little light bulb.
And I think what also fascinates me about some of the nano fish is that there's basically like two types of miniaturization. There's little fish that are essentially exactly the same as a bigger fish. Like they have all the same bones, they have the same scale structure, they're just super tiny. And then there's species that basically stopped developing at a larval stage, and that's why they're small. So there's like a lot of really interesting things and a lot of really interesting fish that, for instance, are lacking things like a cranial cap. So they can be really useful for cancer research because they don't have to necessarily kill the fish to image the brain.
Yes.
Or it's just neat. Some of them have modified pelvic girdles, so they make noises, and there's just a lot of really fascinating things about all fish, but for me in particular, small fish.
Like they've used zebra danios for research for so many years, and the reason had nothing other to do the fact that they are just exceptionally fast at replicating.
Yes.
So when they're testing them for things, they can replicate it really fast to get their results.
But one problem with zebra danios that they face a lot of the times is that when they do the modification of the genetics, they can sometimes have problems with getting the development to a stage that is far enough along to be able to use and document in their scientific research. So say it has to get to however many days old. Yeah. A specific number of them have to get that far through the development in order for it to be a viable study.
Yes.
So what's interesting, and some of the species that I've introduced to some of the research labs are things like Sundadanio axelrodi. They're a little tiny fish. Again, they're lacking scales on the top. They have a modified pelvic girdle, and they're lacking a cranial cap. And they throw a ton of eggs.
This is all stuff that should be just common knowledge for all of you guys already.
Sorry, it's a little. I'm a nerd, but and Danionella translucinda or those type, the little tiny glass fish are completely see-through. You can watch the egg development.
Yes, yeah, it's really cool.
You can see everything. They could use dyes because with some of the research they're trying to interrupt, for instance, the lymphatic system to stop cancer. They can see it in the fish without having to open the fish up. So it's kind of neat,
That's
you know.
Cool. See, in a day and age, we're both a little bit older, and we both come from the era of VCRs. I'm old enough that I came from the time frame before VCRs. That if you went and saw a movie in the theater, the kids today can't understand that you couldn't go and watch it again unless you went back to the theater.
Right.
And the reason I say that is, when we talk about fish, as I'm getting older, I never had to wear glasses before. And the thought of me keeping really small fish now isn't exciting because I have to really struggle to go and see that little tiny fish. It still has the exact same appeal as a big fish. It has all those same traits and same behaviors and all those wonderful things that you can see, just in a much smaller package, which makes it more challenging for us as we get older.
For me, what I really enjoy though is utilizing all the plants and the more natural styles of decor. And I like to sit and observe my tank. I have my chair in the middle of my room. I also have a rolling chair that I use. And what's really fun for me is to just sit there and watch it and see the plants moving in the water and see what comes out of the weeds. And so while they are small, if you just sit and watch, it's really magical to just see all these fish come out of the weeds and interact with the environment. And I find it to be really, really rewarding. There's lots of fish in this world. There's something for everybody. This is just what grabbed my fancy right from the very beginning, whether it's dwarf catfish, dwarf cichlids, small species of rasbora, tetra, danio.
All the invertebrates that go hand in hand with them.
I love it all. I just think it's so fascinating.
See, I've never, and I've mentioned it before in my channel, I don't know how to do anything small. My last name's Biggs. I'm big. I'm like you. We're loud. We're colorful. That's our personalities. But I've never done nano. I don't know how to do nano. My planted tanks are always in the 75, 100, 150 gallon tanks. But when you do bigger tanks and more along the line with the nano, same with bigger fish. When I had my 750 gallon tank and I put 6 to 8 inch or foot long fish in that tank, you'll see behaviors in that tank of those fish that you would never witness in a 75 or smaller. And same thing with the nanos, I'm sure. You take you know, you keep six little rasboras in a 20-gallon tank, but you put 100 of them in a 200-gallon tank, you're going to see things that you never saw before.
Well, and that's something that I really like to show, like my 75-gallon Nano. You know, I'm looking at it across the room right now, and you just see all this activity and color that in a smaller aquarium you wouldn't be able to see, and it's just super rewarding. The
interrelations between the different species that have in the tank and so forth. We'll do a quick little tour of some of the tanks and stuff like that. You'll see some pictures and some videos, some of the stuff that we're talking about, and we'll just kind of highlight that while we're going about talking. Now, since you started YouTube, you've evolved greatly. I know you had some health things and stuff like that necessitated the change and stuff, and that's, you know, that's part of it. But you've always had this passion, not just for one little thing. Your yard has so much, you know, there's so many things, facets in your yard, different types of tree species and stuff. Like I remember you telling me that when you bought this house, it was actually a botanist or somebody that owned the property, and her property is riddled with some really exceptional plants. And now that you've got a greenhouse going and you're evolving constantly.
Well, I like to think that it's just part of my personality. Like, the reason I got interested in what I got interested in with fish is because I'm always curious and I like to learn. And
we're very similar.
Feeding my brain like that gives me great personal satisfaction. So the plants are just a natural extension. And again, I'm gravitating to a lot of stuff that's a bit less typical. I'm really into the carnivorous plants because they have very specialized needs. They really draw you in. They've got some fascinating...
Draw you in.
Yeah.
Little shop of horrors draw you in.
You know, or even with just my house plants, what I find so interesting about those is like all the different soil needs and humidity needs, and there's a lot to learn. And the thing with plants is that it's usually pretty obvious if you're having success or not relatively quickly, because if you're not, they wilt or they develop holes in the leaves. So for me, it's just been a really fun way to just be involved with more hobbies. And I think a lot of that boils down too to like sort of being a naturalist, like really caring about the environment outside, really enjoying spending time in nature. I grew up on a big farm. I've always liked to be outside. I like to be around animals. I prefer animals and plants to most people, you know.
See, my background is mostly, most people don't know it, but my background is mostly in plants.
Right. Well,
fish was secondary for me. And
I mean, growing up, we raised all our own food. So those aren't ornamental plants, but it was a relationship with plants that started from the time I can remember, and animals and everything. So to me, like these slices of nature, to me is just an extension of that whole mindset. And it's really important to me when I get fish to give them sort of the most natural or most comfortable representation, because ultimately we're responsible for their habitat. So to me, it's all related.
See, the thing that fascinates me more about plants, and people have seen some of the videos I've put out about plants, is it's difficult to do a video on a tree.
Yes.
Because a tree, you don't see anything. But people don't think of, just consciously, average people don't think about plants as sexual. They don't think of plants as violent. And like, plants can be extremely violent. Not just your little shop of horror type plants, but like just average trees.
Well, the fact that I had to take 20 minutes last night picking spines out of my husband's hands because he touched a plant he shouldn't have is a good example of that as well. Yeah, I was like, well, don't do that. Oh, too late.
But you have a black walnut on your property, and that's a beautiful, decorative, similar to like an oak for the style of tree it is. But what people don't know is black walnuts are a very dangerous tree if you on your property, if you have livestock or things like that. And that's one tree's method of defense.
Both sexes for them to produce fruit, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I believe so.
Yeah, they're not little trees. No, they're the size of an apple.
Bigger, yeah. I mean, look at that. They're great shade trees, though. So if you're not raising livestock,
as long as you're not sitting under it.
Oh yeah, till they fall.
Here's all the stages of the black walnut after the fruit has fallen. The green one was picked off the ground, and as they break down, and the one at the very far left there, you can see the squirrels have gotten to it and taken the meat out of it. Not something you'd want to be sitting under when it falls, because it's maybe not the size of a regulation baseball. It's a little bit smaller than a tennis ball, but it's got some pretty substance to it when it falls. I think that would hurt. That video that I did, that series of video on that Victoria lily, you know, you know, it looks beautiful from up top. It's a spectacular looking plant. But when you flip that lily pad over, it's just absolute violence on the bottom. And that's because it lives in an environment that species are always trying to kill it.
Well, even with pine trees, if you think about pine trees and how they drop their leaves to change the acidity of the soil so that other things can't grow, so that they can maintain the dominance wherever they're planted.
Their food sources and their water sources, everything. Yeah, that's stuff that's fascinating. You guys got to start getting out more, start getting out in nature and looking at this stuff. The world around us is a fascinating place. If you can just take a little smidge of her brain, maybe add a dab of mine, you guys can go out there and you'll see the world in an entirely different way.
I would encourage you to slow down and look around and really take inspiration. Look up, look down, not just straight ahead, and certainly not at your phones when you're outside, because you can learn so much.
Do you love that when you walk in the house and you've been doing yard work for 4 hours and there's all your kids sitting around just staring at their phone? That drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So what's the next phase for Rachel O'Leary?
Well, I'm in the process of moving around the fish room out of necessity. I cannot stand down here for long enough to be able to do more than maintain and enjoy. And I would really like to continue to sell the fish that I'm breeding. So I'm in the process of restructuring everything down here. But really, as always, I think my focus is going to continue to be education.
Yep.
So for me, it's all about the long haul, showing the evolution of things. And I've really
you can't just go and buy a fish, put it in your tank, take a quick little video, talk about that fish with some facts you found on the internet, send it out, and then get rid of the fish. You're not going to get that same facet as if you grow it up for a couple of generations.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, in an ideal world, I would be able to sell fish again, but I don't know that that will ever happen again consistently because of my knee replacement. So we'll see what we can do here. We'll just structure things to make it easier to possibly do that, but otherwise I'm going to continue growing my collection and sharing the things that I learn about all these neat little critters.
Is there anything that you can think of in your fish room? And I'm going to totally put you on the spot. But I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. There's a species I've always wanted to keep. Like you did your beautiful Hillstream tank, you know, and that was a massive undertaking, a massive project, not just to think the whole process through, but develop and build the manifold and the way everything worked to actually replicate that species or that system in the wild in an aquarium. A glass box is not nature.
No, no. I mean, I dream of building a really massive tank for my big boys. The reality is that will happen, but it's going to be exceptionally difficult to do because we have to build it down here.
Yes.
Because nothing over 7 feet can fit into my fish room.
I happen to know somebody that could help you building a plywood aquarium.
Well, I was thinking about doing stainless, honestly, welded stainless. With then an acrylic viewing.
With her husband being a welder, you know, that's a good option.
But, you know, I'm not sure about that. I'd like to do some more paludarium, vivarium, emergent plant growth setups. I'd like to play around a lot more with lots of things. I would like to do some high-tech setups so I can share the learning curve with that. Because I only ever do no CO2, no ferts. Plants, and as you can see, I mean, I have like deceptively good success for inexplicable reasons, but I'd like to set up a high-tech aquarium for the first time with my followers so they can actually see
really high-end lighting and CO2.
Yeah, see the process of me learning something.
I think my high-tech planted tank just makes people mad. Because I do high-tech plants. I don't necessarily do the high-tech plants like some of those really well-renowned guys who are doing the really high-end oddball cutting plants, but I do the CO2 and the good light. When it comes to the fertilizer, it's a dip. And I know that would infuriate some of them. Oh no, you need 12 millimeters of magnesium.
Well, the market's really changed. For the longest time, utilizing the dry fertilizers where you did individual dosing of each one, the estimative index and all of that was really the only way to create the balance that you would need. Because the thing about, as you know, about planted tanks is there's not a cookie cutter approach because everybody's water is slightly different depending on what substrate or hardscape materials or all the variables that go into a planted aquarium make it so that there's never like A plus B equals,
Yep.
X result, and that will always be that way.
And we're not setting up a tank. This tank is only going to have plants from this one specific river. We're taking
Right.
plants from all over the world, and
Well-
every single plant has its own specific needs, not just in light, but it might need more magnesium to do this, and this one might need more
Right.
of this to do this. And when we're adding a dosage, we're not doing it for one individual plant.
Well, and then you throw in the variables of light fixtures, age of light fixtures, scatter of the light,
Yeah.
like how far you've hung it from your tank. It really makes it so that there isn't a cookie cutter approach to do things, which is what I find fascinating.
And you could literally take a brand new tank and all the plant life and all the fancy substrate and all the light and duplicate exactly down to the letter what another well-known individual is doing and have completely different results.
Yeah, and even within my own fish room, like my aquariums share lights, and I can set up 2 aquariums side by side with the same substrate, similar hardscape, same amount of plant mass, and have vastly different response from the plants. Because
Such as?
such as up here. This tank has no algae. This tank has tons of algae.
And right on the other side, the
This-
tank of shame.
This tank doesn't even have fish in it. It has 1 fish, and look at the growth in that one. Whereas this
2
one.
fish.
Oh yeah, there's fry in there.
She's a liar.
There's fry.
2 fish.
But what's really interesting to me is that as the planted hobby has really gained traction, specifically aquascaping,
Yes.
there's been a lot more thought put into product development as far as fertilizers, and there are ones now that you can just dump in there and get pretty good results.
That's for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, and the thing is, that's for most people.
Yeah.
And especially for someone like me who has so many aquariums and my greenhouse and my summer tubs and my plant wall and my bog garden and my succulent gardens and my teenage kids and my husband and, life.
That equates to ample free time.
That means that unless it's not been realistic for me to do a high-tech setup, because making sure I stay on track with the dosing, making sure everything is done to spec is not realistic.
Oh, I remember back in the day, I had a triangular shaped wood tank, and it had the old school metal halide pendant
Oh,
lamp
gosh,
on
yeah.
it, and it was open top tank, so the plants grew 2 feet out of the tank, and I did the super detailed dry mixtures and stuff, and I was anal about doing a high-tech plant tank. That I actually wrote an article, I think it was in Aquarium Fish, this is in the 80s. And I did that. The only problem being is if for some reason you went away for a wedding out of town
Oh,
for a
yeah,
weekend,
everything
you
would-
come back, it was like 3 hours of gardening just to get it back in check. And I don't have that time.
And when I was doing my most speaking, it was every other weekend, year round.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
to manage and do a good job in a high tech setup was just not feasible. But now I'm only traveling maybe 5 or 6 times a year.
Every time you go away, you come back, and it's like you got double the amount of work just because you went away.
Yes, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to travel now. Not because of the fish, but because of life.
Yeah.
And
Life does have a way of interrupting.
and YouTube, the obligation I feel to my subscribers to
Yep.
keep a schedule means that in order for me to travel for a long weekend, I have to do twice as much work leading up to it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then I come home.
We were talking
behind.
about that last night. Like, I've got videos scheduled because I get back and I'm home for a day and I leave. I'm home for a day and I'm gone. It just
Yep.
never seemed to end, and that's the way life is.
Yep.
So, I love it, Rachel. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, buddy.
My dear friend, guys, thank you. Thank you. Some time spent in Rachel's fish room. You see nothing but absolutely stunning displays, a beautiful and eclectic assortment of very, very healthy stock fish, invertebrates, plants, everything under the sun. So let's sit back and enjoy a little tour into her life, her fish room, and her outdoor passions. Miss Rachel O'Leary.
Rachel's knowledge, dedication, and passion to absolutely everything she does truly rings true. She's an exceptionally gifted woman, and it's very easy to understand after spending only a few minutes with her why she's become such an inspiration to so many. I am truly proud to call her my dear friend.